I, 32, came home from the clinic alone. The air outside was cold, but I did not feel it. A deeper cold had settled inside me, a hollow space where hope used to be. The doctor's words echoed in my head, gentle but final. There was nothing more they could do. The drive home was a blur. I remember the red of traffic lights and the gray of the sky. I did not cry. It felt like the tears were frozen somewhere deep inside me, waiting for a thaw that might never come. My husband, Mark, 34, was supposed to be with me, but he had called that morning. A last-minute emergency at work, he had said. He sounded sorry. He promised he would be home when I got back. He said we would get through this together. I believed him. I parked the car in our driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the front door of our house. The house we had bought to fill with a family. The house with a small, sunny room upstairs that I had spent months turning into a nursery. I finally found the strength to get out of the car. Each step felt heavy, like I was wading through thick mud. My body ached from the procedure at the clinic, a dull, persistent pain that was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I put my key in the lock. The metal felt cold against my skin. I just wanted to go to the nursery. I wanted to sit in the rocking chair and hold the little teddy bear I had bought, the one with the soft brown fur. I needed to be in that room. It was the only place that felt real, the only place where the dream had felt solid and warm. I opened the door. I stepped inside. And then I collapsed. Not because of the pain, or the exhaustion, or the grief. I collapsed because of what I saw. Or rather, what I did not see. The hallway was different. The small table where we kept our keys was gone. In its place was a tall, dark bookshelf I had never seen before. It was filled with thick, leather-bound books that were not ours. I stood up slowly, my hand on the wall for support. My heart started to beat faster, a frantic, panicked rhythm. I called out his name. Mark, I said. My voice was a weak whisper. There was no answer. I walked further into the house. The living room was the same, thank God. Nothing had changed there. But the faint smell of fresh paint hung in the air, a chemical sharpness that made my stomach turn. I knew before I even started climbing the stairs. A terrible certainty settled over me, cold and heavy as a stone. I took the steps one by one, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. Each step was a lifetime. Each step brought me closer to something I did not want to see. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw that the door to the nursery was closed. It was always open. I always left it open just a little so I could peek inside whenever I walked past. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold and unfamiliar. It was a new doorknob, a heavy, brass thing that did not belong. I turned it. I pushed the door open. The soft yellow walls were gone. They were now a dark, somber gray. The white crib I had assembled with my own hands was gone. The rocking chair where I had planned to sing lullabies was gone. The changing table, the mobile with the little smiling stars, the soft rug with the alphabet on it, all of it was gone. In its place was a massive wooden desk. A black leather office chair was tucked behind it. The bookshelf from the hallway had a twin against the far wall, also filled with books I did not recognize. A lamp with a green glass shade sat on the corner of the desk, casting a sickly light across the room. It was a study, a stranger's study. They had erased every trace of my baby. They had erased every trace of my hope. And that is when the frozen tears finally began to thaw. I sank to my knees on the hard wooden floor, and I wept. I wept for the child I had lost. I wept for the room that had been stolen. And I wept for the terrifying, sudden realization that I was completely and utterly alone. I must have been on the floor for a long time. The sound of a key in the front door startled me back to the present. I heard footsteps, then Mark's voice calling my name. Anna? Are you home? He called. I could not answer. I could not move. I just stayed on my knees, staring at the empty space where the crib should have been. He came up the stairs and stopped in the doorway. Oh, he said. That was all. He looked at me on the floor, then at the new room, then back at me. There was no surprise in his eyes. only a kind of weary resignation. "You're home early," he said. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice was raw. "Where is all of it?" "Anna, let's go downstairs," he said, taking a step toward me. "We can talk about this." "No," I said, my voice getting stronger. "I want to talk about it here. In your new office. Where is my baby's room, Mark?" He sighed, a long, tired sound. "I did this for you," he said. "For us. I thought it would be better this way. A clean break. So you wouldn't have to look at it every day and be reminded." "Reminded?" I said, the word catching in my throat. "You think a room is what reminds me? You think I could ever forget?" I finally looked at him, really looked at him. His face was a mask of careful concern, but his eyes were shifty. He could not meet my gaze. That was when I saw her. His mother, Eleanor, was standing behind him in the hallway, her arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. "It was for the best, dear," Eleanor said, her voice smooth as silk. "It's better to face reality and move forward. All that baby stuff was just a painful monument to what might have been." I felt a surge of white-hot anger. "You did this," I said, looking from her to Mark. "You both did this. While I was at the clinic, while I was alone, going through the worst day of my life, you were here, erasing him." "We weren't erasing anyone," Mark said quickly, his voice rising. "We were being practical. This room has the best light in the house. I need a proper place to work from home now that I'm up for the promotion. It makes sense." "Sense," I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. "It makes sense to you to throw away every memory of our child before I even get home from the hospital?" "It wasn't a child yet, Anna," Eleanor said softly, but her words were sharp as glass. "It's important to keep perspective. That was it. That was the moment something inside me broke. Or maybe it was the moment something new was forged in its place. Something hard and cold and sharp." I stood up, my body trembling. I looked at my husband, the man who was supposed to protect me, and at his mother, the woman who had always treated me like a rival. And I saw them for what they were. They were not grieving with me. They were managing me. They were tidying up a mess. I was the mess. My grief was the mess. And this cold, gray room was their solution. I did not say another word. I turned around, walked past them without looking at either of them, went into our bedroom, and locked the door. I knew then that this was not just about a room. This was about everything. And I was going to find out what that everything was. The first night was a blur of silence and locked doors. Mark knocked a few times, his voice muffled. "Anna, please open the door," he said it softly at first. "Let's just talk about this," he said it with more force later. "This is ridiculous. You can't just lock yourself in here," he said it with anger in the end. I did not answer. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. The house felt wrong now, tainted. The faint smell of paint was a constant reminder. I thought about the little yellow duck I had painted on the nursery wall. I had spent a whole weekend on it, making sure it was perfect. Was it painted over in gray now? The thought was a physical pain, a fresh stab of grief. I wondered where everything went. The crib, the clothes, the tiny little socks. Did they just throw it all away? Did they put it in black garbage bags and leave it on the curb? The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The next morning, I heard him leave for work. The sound of the front door closing was a relief. I waited another hour, just to be sure he was really gone. Then I unlocked the bedroom door. The house was quiet. I walked back to the new study. I stood in the doorway and looked at it in the morning light. It was even worse than I remembered. It was permanent. The desk was solid, heavy oak. The bookshelves were bolted to the wall. This was not a temporary solution. This was a statement. This was an erasure. I walked over to the desk. On it was a new, expensive-looking laptop. Next to it was a leather blotter and a pen set. Mark's ambition was laid out for everyone to see. He had always wanted to climb the ladder at his firm. He talked about it constantly. "We need to project success," he would say. This room screamed success. Or, at least, the desperate desire for it. My eyes scanned the room, looking for any trace of what was there before. There was nothing. It was a perfect, sterile space. Except for one thing. Tucked into the wastebasket next to the desk was a crumpled piece of paper. My hands trembled as I reached for it. I smoothed it out on the desk. It was a receipt. A receipt from a high-end furniture store downtown. I saw the items listed. 1 executive desk, 2 oak bookshelves, 1 leather chairman's chair. The total made my stomach clench. It was an obscene amount of money. Money we were supposed to be saving. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. It was the date. I stared at it, reading it over and over, willing it to be different. The date on the receipt was from 3 days ago. 3 days ago. That was the day before my final ultrasound. The day before the doctor confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the baby's heart had stopped beating. They had bought all of this furniture before we even knew for sure. They knew. Or they had not cared about the slim chance that remained. They had made their plans. The thought was so monstrous I could barely process it. Mark had held my hand at the clinic appointment. He had put his arm around me when the doctor gave us the news. He had tears in his eyes. Were they fake? Was it all an act? I sank into the cold leather of the chairman's chair, the receipt clutched in my hand. The room spun around me. This was not just insensitivity. This was not just a clumsy attempt to help me move on. This was a plan. They had a plan. And I was not a part of it. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. Who was this man I had married? Who was this woman who had orchestrated this? I looked around the room again. This was not just a study. It was a tombstone. And they had placed it right on top of my heart. I folded the receipt carefully and put it in my pocket. It felt heavy, like a piece of evidence. And I knew, with a certainty that cut through the fog of my grief, that I was going to need it. I needed to talk to someone. I could not keep this inside me. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in. I called my best friend, Chloe. Her voice was warm and concerned when she answered. Anna, how are you? I was going to call you later. How did everything go? Tears I did not know I had left started to stream down my face. Chloe, I sobbed. Something terrible has happened. What is it? She asked, her voice sharp with alarm. Are you okay? Is it about the, you know? It's Mark, I said, my voice breaking. And his mother. They did something. I told her everything. I told her about coming home, about the nursery being gone, about the new study. I told her about their excuses, about Eleanor's cold words. And then I told her about the receipt. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. No, Chloe said, her voice a horrified whisper. Anna, no. They did not. The date is the day before the final appointment, I said, my voice flat. They bought it all before we knew for sure. There was a long silence. Then Chloe said, that is not just cruel, Anna. That is monstrous. What kind of person does that? I don't know, I whispered. I don't know who he is anymore. You need to get out of there, she said firmly. You can come stay with me. Just pack a bag and leave right now. I can't, I said. Not yet. If I leave, they win. They get exactly what they want. They get the house, the perfect little life they've designed, and I just disappear. I can't let them do that. So, what are you going to do? Chloe asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm going to find out why they did this. Not the excuses they gave me. The real reason. I felt a flicker of something inside me, a tiny flame in the cold emptiness. It was determination. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a fragile, grieving woman they could easily manage. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Okay, Chloe said, her voice steady. Okay, but you are not alone in this. Whatever you need, you call me. Day or night. Do you hear me? I hear you, I said, and for the first time in days, I felt a tiny sliver of strength return. Thank you, Chloe. After I hung up, I felt a little clearer. Chloe was right. This was monstrous. And I needed to understand the monster. I started in the new study. I went through the drawers of the desk. They were mostly empty, except for some new stationery and pens. but in the bottom drawer, tucked away at the back, I found a folder. It was labeled Household Finances. I opened it. Inside were our recent bank statements, credit card bills, and loan documents for the house. I had always let Mark handle the finances. He was an accountant, after all. He said he enjoyed it. I trusted him. Now, that trust felt naive. I sat down and started going through the papers one by one. At first, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, utility bills, grocery expenses. But then I noticed a pattern. Over the last 6 months, there had been a series of large withdrawals from our joint savings account. Thousands of dollars at a time. I did not recognize the transactions. They were listed as transfers to an investment account, an account I did not know we had. My heart started to beat faster. I remembered Mark telling me he was moving some of our savings into a high-yield fund to make our money work for us. He had made it sound so responsible. I had just nodded and agreed. Now I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. I kept digging. I found the statements for this mysterious investment account. It was not a joint account. It was solely in Mark's name. And the money was not just sitting there. It had been used to buy stocks. Risky stocks, from what I could tell. And a lot of them were down. Way down. He had lost a significant amount of our savings. Money we had both worked so hard for. Money I had earmarked for the baby. The cold anger was back, sharper this time. He had lied to me. He had gambled with our future and lost. And he had never said a word. I looked at the dates of the biggest losses. They coincided with the time we had started trying for a baby. He must have been under immense pressure. The promotion he was up for suddenly made a lot more sense. He was not just ambitious. He was desperate. He needed that raise to cover the hole he had dug for us. And a baby. A baby would have been an expense he could not handle. The thought was so ugly, so mercenary that I felt sick. Was that it? Was our child just a number on a balance sheet to him? A liability he was relieved to be rid of? I kept looking through the folder. Tucked between 2 bank statements was a printout of an email. It was from Eleanor to Mark. The subject line was "Forward Progress." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read it. The email was dated a week ago. Eleanor wrote, "I spoke with Richard at the firm again. He is very impressed with your work, but he mentioned that the partners are looking for someone who demonstrates complete commitment. Someone without distractions. The corner office is within your grasp, my boy. We just need to ensure your home life reflects your professional dedication. Distractions." Was I the distraction? Was our baby the distraction? The email continued. "The study will be a perfect signal of your seriousness. A man with a proper study is a man who means business. I have already sourced the perfect furniture. We must act decisively to create the right environment for your success." There it was, in black and white. It was not about my grief. It was not about helping me move on. It was about his promotion. It was about creating an image. The study was a prop in a play he and his mother were staging. And I was just an inconvenient character they had to write out of the scene. The rage I felt was so pure and so intense it burned away the last of my tears. They had not just erased my child. They had sacrificed him on the altar of Mark's career. I carefully folded the email and the bank statements and put them with a receipt. My collection of evidence was growing. I did not know what my plan was yet. But I knew one thing for sure. The play was not over. And the final act was going to be mine. I spent the next few days in a strange state of calm. The grief was still there, a constant, heavy weight in my chest. But now it was accompanied by a cold, clear purpose. I was an actress in my own home. When Mark came home from work, I was quiet and withdrawn, which he interpreted as me still being lost in my sorrow. He was gentle with me, in a distant, careful way. He would ask if I had eaten. He would suggest we watch a movie. He was playing the part of the concerned husband, and I was playing the part of the broken wife. But behind my sad eyes, I was watching him. I was listening to every word. I was gathering information. One evening, he was on the phone in his new study. He had the door closed, but I could hear his voice, a low murmur. I crept closer, my heart pounding. I stood by the door, straining to hear. He was talking to his mother. She's still not really talking, he said. Just sits there. I think it was the right move, Mom. The room. It's forcing her to face it. There was a pause. No. She hasn't asked about the money. I don't think she has any idea. She's never been interested in the finances. Another pause. I know. I'll get it back. Once this promotion comes through, we'll be fine. I just need to land it. Richard is making the final decision next week. He sounded confident, assured. He had no idea I was on the other side of the door. He had no idea his whole world was about to come crashing down. That night, I made a decision. I was not going to confront him alone. This was not a private matter between a husband and a wife anymore. He and his mother had made it about appearances, about professional image. So, I was going to make the confrontation public. Or at least, family public. I knew that Mark's father, Frank, and his sister, Clara, were coming for their regular Sunday dinner that weekend. Frank was a quiet man who had always been overshadowed by Eleanor. He adored Mark and usually went along with whatever his wife and son wanted. He was an enabler, but I always felt he had a good heart buried under all that passivity. Clara was different. She was younger than Mark, and she had a bit of a rebellious streak. She had moved out of state for college and had only recently moved back. She and I had always gotten along well. She saw her mother's manipulative side more clearly than anyone else in the family. She was my only potential ally. Sunday dinner. That would be the stage. I had the receipt. I had the financial statements. I had the email. And I had the memory of his phone call. It was time to pull back the curtain. I spent Saturday preparing. Not the dinner, but myself. I went through my evidence one more time, arranging it in a logical order. I thought about what I was going to say, how I was going to say it. I could not let my anger or my grief overwhelm me. I had to be calm. I had to be precise. I had to be unbreakable. I called Chloe and told her my plan. Are you sure you want to do it this way? She asked, her voice full of concern. In front of his whole family? It could get ugly. It's already ugly, Chloe, I said. They made it ugly. They built a monument to their ambition in the middle of my grief. I'm just going to turn the lights on so everyone can see it. Okay, she said. I get it. Just be careful and call me the second it's over. I will, I promised. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, next to the man who had become a stranger to me, and I planned my revolution. He snored softly, oblivious. He probably thought he had gotten away with it. He thought I was weak, broken, and compliant. He had no idea that the woman lying next to him was a soldier getting ready for war. Sunday arrived, gray and overcast, matching my mood. Mark was in high spirits. He was cheerful, attentive, bustling around the kitchen getting things ready for dinner. He was performing. He was playing the role of the successful man with the perfect home life, eagerly awaiting his family. I played my part, too. I was the quiet, supportive wife, setting the table, arranging flowers in a vase. On the surface, we looked like a normal couple. But underneath, the silence was screaming. Eleanor and Frank arrived first. Eleanor swept in, all smiles and perfume, giving Mark a hug that was just a little too long. She gave me a brief, cool kiss on the cheek. You're looking a little better, dear, she said, her eyes scanning me critically. A bit of color in your cheeks, it was not a compliment. It was an assessment. She was checking to see if her project, my moving on, was proceeding on schedule. Frank gave me a hesitant, kind smile. Good to see you, Anna, he said softly. He was the only one whose eyes held genuine sympathy. I felt a pang of sadness for him. He was trapped in this family, just as much as I was. Clara arrived a few minutes later. She gave me a real hug, a warm, tight squeeze that communicated more than words ever could. How are you holding up? She whispered in my ear. Honestly, I whispered back. I'm not. But I'm working on it. She pulled back and looked at me, her expression searching. She knew something was wrong, something more than just the miscarriage. She had always been perceptive. We sat down to dinner. The conversation was strained. Mark and Eleanor dominated, talking about his work, the upcoming promotion, people at his firm that I did not know. They were a well-rehearsed double act. Frank chimed in with a few supportive comments. Clara and I were mostly silent. I picked at my food, my stomach in knots. I waited. I needed the right moment. It came after the main course, when Mark started talking about his plans for the future. Once this promotion is finalized, he said, leaning back in his chair with a confident smile, we'll finally be in a place where we can really start building our future. Get the finances on solid ground. Maybe even think about taking a real vacation. Eleanor beamed at him. That's my boy, she said. Always thinking ahead. It's so important to be practical. To make a solid foundation before taking on new responsibilities. Her eyes flickered toward me for a fraction of a second. That was my cue. I put down my fork. The small sound it made on the plate seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Everyone looked at me. Speaking of practicalities, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I was a little confused about a recent purchase, Mark. Mark's smile tightened. Oh, what purchase is that? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. The new furniture, I said. For your study. It must have been very expensive. Eleanor jumped in immediately. It was an investment, Anna, she said smoothly. An investment in Mark's future. And ours. I'm sure it was, I said, keeping my eyes fixed on my husband. I was just surprised when I saw the receipt. The date, specifically, I paused, letting the silence stretch. You bought it all on Tuesday, the day before we went to the clinic. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The air grew thick and heavy. Frank looked confused, glancing from me to Mark. Clara's eyes widened. She was putting the pieces together. Mark's face went pale. I don't see what the date has to do with anything, he said, his voice a little too loud. We knew what the doctors were going to say. It was a foregone conclusion. I was just trying to be proactive. To spare you more pain. Was it to spare me pain? I ask, and my voice is different now. It is cold. The past tense falls away. This is not a memory anymore. This is happening right now. I am in this room, and I am not the victim. I am the judge. Or was it to get a head start on building your solid foundation? Anna, this is not the time or the place, Eleanor says, her voice sharp as a whip. She glares at me. The mask of the caring mother-in-law has vanished. I think this is the perfect time and place, I say. I turn to Clara and Frank. Mark and Eleanor cleared out our nursery while I was at the hospital having a procedure for our miscarriage. They turned it into an office for him, so he could look more impressive for a promotion at work. Frank gasps. He looks at his wife, then at his son, his face a canvas of disbelief. Eleanor? Mark? Is this true? She's exaggerating, Mark says, his voice shaking. She's grieving. She's not thinking clearly. Am I not? I ask. I reach into the pocket of my cardigan and pull out the folded papers. I place them on the table. First, the receipt. Here is the receipt. Dated the day before we knew for sure, then I lay down the bank statements. And here are the bank statements, showing thousands of dollars of our savings that you lost in the stock market without telling me. Mark looks like he has been punched in the gut. He stares at the papers, speechless. Eleanor finds her voice first. How dare you, she hisses. Prying into our private financial matters. This is a family matter, to be handled with discretion. Our child was a family matter, I say, my voice rising. And you treated him like a business expense to be written off. A distraction that needed to be managed. I pull out the final piece of paper. The email. I slide it across the table to Frank. Read this, I say. Read what your wife wrote to your son about my distractions and how they needed to act decisively. Frank picks up the email. His hands are trembling. As he reads, the color drains from his face. He looks up at Eleanor, and for the first time since I have known him, his eyes are filled with something other than passive acceptance. They are filled with horror. And shame. Eleanor, he whispers. What have you done? I did what was necessary for our son's success, she snaps, her composure finally breaking. Something has to be done to secure his future. Anna was holding him back with all this emotional nonsense. Emotional nonsense? Clara says, her voice dripping with disgust. She lost a baby, Mom. Her baby. Your grandchild. And you call her grief emotional nonsense? It wasn't a baby yet. Eleanor shouts, repeating the same cruel line she used on me before. It was a problem. A financial problem and a career problem. I helped him solve it. The admission hangs in the air, ugly and undeniable. She said it. She finally said the quiet part out loud. Mark puts his head in his hands. He does not deny it. He cannot. Frank just stares at his wife, as if he has never seen her before. Clara looks at me, her eyes full of a mixture of pity and rage on my behalf. I have them. I have them all. The truth is out, and it is more hideous than I could have imagined. But I am not done yet. There is one more thing. You think you solved a problem? I say, my voice dangerously quiet. You think this is over? I look directly at Mark. His face is ashen. He will not meet my eyes. The other night, I heard you on the phone with your mother. In your new study, you said you thought redecorating the room was the right move. You said it was forcing me to face it. You said I had no idea about the money. I let each sentence land like a blow. But you were wrong, Mark. I know everything. He looks up at me then, his eyes wide with panic. The confident, ambitious man from the start of dinner is gone. In his place is a terrified little boy who has just been caught. Anna, he starts, but he has no words. You have nothing to say. I finish for him. Because there is nothing to say. You and your mother made a choice. You chose a desk and a chair over your own child. You chose a promotion over your wife's heart. You built your future on top of my pain. I stand up. My legs are shaking, but my voice is steady. And now, I'm making my choice. I look around the table, at the shattered remains of this family. I am choosing me. I turn and walk out of the dining room, leaving them all sitting there in the wreckage they created. I go upstairs into our bedroom, and I start to pack a bag. This time, I am not locking myself in. I am breaking myself out. Clara appeared in the bedroom doorway a few minutes later. I was pulling sweaters from a drawer and folding them into a suitcase on the bed. My movements were automatic, detached. I could still hear the low, angry murmur of voices from downstairs. Can I help? She asked softly. I shook my head, not looking at her. I'm okay. No, you're not, she said. She came into the room and sat on the edge of the bed.
Anna, I'm so sorry.
I had no idea. I knew my mother could be difficult, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. She said it herself. I said, my voice flat. She was solving a problem. You're not a problem, Clara said fiercely. You're my sister-in-law. Your family. Or you were, she sighed. What they did is unforgivable. My father. I've never seen him look at my mother that way. Like he doesn't even know who she is. He knows, I said, pausing my packing to look at her. Deep down, he's always known. He just chose not to see it. She nodded slowly. You're probably right. He lets her run everything. He just goes along. But not this time. I think you broke something in him tonight. Or maybe you fixed something. She looked at my suitcase. Where will you go? Chloe's, I said.
For now.
I just need to get out of this house. You can stay with me, she offered. My apartment isn't much, but you'd have your own room. You wouldn't be alone. I was touched by her offer, by the genuine kindness in her eyes. It was a stark contrast to the cold calculation I had been living with. Thank you, Clara. That means a lot. Let me just get through tonight, and then I'll figure out. Okay, she said. She stood up and came over to me, putting a hand on my arm. For what it's worth, I'm on your side. 100%. My brother is a coward and my mother is a monster. And you deserve so much better. Tears welled up in my eyes, but these were different tears. They were not tears of grief or rage. They were tears of gratitude. In the midst of all this betrayal, here was an unexpected ally. A small island of decency in an ocean of cruelty. Thank you, I whispered. She helped me pack the rest of my things in silence. When the suitcase was full, she carried it downstairs for me. The scene in the dining room was tense and quiet. Eleanor was sitting ramrod straight, her face a thunderous mask. Frank was staring into space, his face pale and drawn. Mark was standing by the window, his back to the room. No one looked at me as I walked toward the front door. Clara put my suitcase down and gave me another quick, fierce hug. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered. I nodded. As I opened the front door, Mark finally turned around. "Anna, wait," he said, his voice desperate. "Don't go. We can fix this." I stopped and looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved, the man I had promised to build a life with. And I felt nothing. The love was gone, burned away by the fire of his betrayal. All that was left was a cold, empty space. "No, we can't," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You can't fix this. You can't unbuy the desk. You can't unwrite the email. You can't unerase our child." I stepped out into the cool night air. "You made your choice, Mark. You chose your study. I hope it brings you all the success you were hoping for." I closed the door behind me, and I did not look back. Driving to Chloe's house felt like coming up for air after being held underwater for a very long time. The city lights blurred past my window. I was free. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had lost everything. My baby, my husband, my home. But I had also found myself. The woman who had walked out of that house was not the same woman who had collapsed in the hallway just a few days before. That woman was broken. This woman was a survivor. When I got to Chloe's apartment, she opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could even say a word. "You did it," she said, her voice full of admiration. I was so worried. "I'm okay," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "I'm really okay. We stayed up late talking." I recounted every detail of the dinner, every word that was said. Chloe listened, her expression a mixture of shock and pride. "You're the strongest person I know," she said when I was finished. "They thought they could just roll over you. They picked the wrong woman." The next morning, I called a lawyer. A friend of Chloe's had recommended her, a woman who specialized in contentious divorces. I met with her that afternoon. I laid out my evidence on her polished conference room table. The receipt, the bank statements, the email from Eleanor. I told her the whole story, my voice calm and steady. When I was done, she looked at me, a grim, determined expression on her face. "This is not just grounds for divorce," she said. "This is what we call egregious marital misconduct. The financial deception, the emotional cruelty. A judge will not look kindly on this." She tapped the bank statements. "He dissipated marital assets without your knowledge or consent. That alone is a serious issue. We can use that to argue for an unequal distribution of assets in your favor." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said with a small, sharp smile, "that you could get the house. And more. The house. The house I had poured my heart into. The house with the gray room that I never wanted to see again. But it was also the house that was paid for, in large part, by a down payment from an inheritance my grandmother had left me. It was my money. My foundation." "Okay," I said, a new resolve hardening inside me. "Let's do it. I want the house." The legal battle was ugly, but swift. Mark and Eleanor tried to fight it, of course. They hired an expensive lawyer who tried to paint me as an unstable, vindictive woman, hysterical with grief. But my evidence was undeniable. The email from Eleanor was particularly damning. My lawyer presented it as proof of a conspiracy between mother and son to defraud me emotionally and financially. When the voice note I had found was introduced, the one where Eleanor coached Mark on how to manage my grief, their case completely fell apart. I hadn't even played it at the dinner. I had saved it. It was my ace in the hole. Hearing her cold, calculating voice fill the courtroom, instructing her son on how to manipulate his grieving wife, was chilling. Even their own lawyer looked disgusted. The judge was not impressed with them. In the end, the settlement was overwhelmingly in my favor. I was awarded the house, free and clear. Mark was ordered to pay back his half of the savings he had lost. And I was granted a restraining order against Eleanor for for emotional harassment. She was forbidden from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. I walked out of the courthouse feeling 10 feet tall. It was not about the money or the house, not really. It was about justice. It was about them facing real, tangible consequences for their actions. They had treated me like I was nothing, a disposable inconvenience. The law had just reminded them that I was everything. Clara called me that evening. "I heard what happened," she said. "Congratulations, I guess. Though it feels weird to say that." "It feels weird to live it," I admitted. "How are things on your end?" She sighed heavily.
A mess.
"A total mess. My father is barely speaking to my mother. He's sleeping in the guest room. He told me he feels like he's been married to a stranger for 40 years. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I had never wanted to hurt Frank.
Don't be, she said.
He needed this. We all did. A bomb needed to go off in our family, and you were the one brave enough to light the fuse. She paused. As for Mark, he's a wreck. The promotion didn't happen. Apparently, the story of what he did got around the office. Someone must have talked. He's a pariah. He had to move back in with Mom and Dad. Or, well, just Mom, since Dad isn't really there. The image of Mark, the ambitious, successful man, living back in his childhood bedroom under the thumb of his manipulative mother, was a satisfying one. He had gotten his wish. He was fully enmeshed in his mother's world, free of the distraction of a wife and child. He had built his foundation, and now he had to lie in it. The first thing I did when I got the house back was hire a crew to undo what they had done. I had them tear out the desk and the bookshelves. I had them repaint the cold gray walls. I chose a new color, a warm, creamy white. I did not turn it back into a nursery. I could not. The pain was still too raw. But I did not want it to be a monument to my grief, either. So, I turned it into something for me. I bought a comfortable armchair, a soft rug, and a tall lamp that gave off a gentle, warm light. I filled the empty space with my own books, my own music, my own things. I turned it into a sanctuary, a room where I could sit and read and heal, a room that was entirely mine. Life moved on. The sharp edges of the pain began to soften. The grief was still a part of me, and always would be, but it no longer defined me. I had good days and bad days. But even on the bad days, I was free. I was in control of my own life, my own home, my own future. I reconnected with friends. I went back to work. I started painting again, something I had loved to do before I met Mark. One day, about a year later, I was walking downtown and I saw him. He was with his mother. They were coming out of a department store. He looked older, tired. The confident swagger was gone. He was carrying his mother's shopping bags. She was talking to him, her expression sharp and commanding. He saw me. Our eyes met for a brief second across the busy street. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret? Shame? I did not know. And I realized with a sudden clarity that I did not care. He was a stranger to me now, a character in a story that was over. I turned away and kept walking, and I did not look back. They had wanted me to move on. And I did. I moved on from them. And in doing so, I had finally, truly come home. The months that followed were a process of rediscovery. Living alone in the house was strange at first. It was so quiet. The silence was a vast, empty canvas. In the beginning, it felt like loneliness. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator seemed to amplify my solitude. But slowly, I began to fill that canvas with my own colors, my own sounds. I played music in the mornings, not the soft classical that Mark had preferred, but the loud, vibrant pop music I had loved in college. I danced in the kitchen while I made coffee, just for myself. I bought ridiculously bright, patterned curtains for the living room, something Eleanor would have called tacky. The house began to feel less like a place of ghosts and more like a reflection of me. My friendship with Clara deepened. She would come over for dinner once a week. We would drink wine and talk for hours. She became my window into the slow-motion implosion of her family. "He's still there," she told me one night, swirling the red wine in her glass. "Mark. He's like a teenager again, but a sad, defeated one. He hides in his old room, playing video games. Mom brings him meals on a tray. She got what she wanted, I said, not without a hint of satisfaction. She has her boy all to herself. She has his shell, Clara corrected me. She broke him, Anna. She thought she was building him up, but she just hollowed him out. And now she's miserable because the perfect, successful son she designed in her head doesn't exist. She's stuck with the real 1 inch. She took a sip of wine.
And Dad.
He's a different person. He started volunteering at the local library. He's taking a woodworking class. It's like he's finally decided to have his own life, separate from hers. They live in the same house, but they're miles apart. It's the coldest war I've ever seen. It was a strange thing to be the catalyst for such a profound change in a family I was no longer a part of. I felt a detached sort of pity for them. They were all trapped in a prison of their own making. A prison of ambition, control, and secrets. I, on the other hand, had been set free. The room upstairs, my sanctuary, became my favorite place in the house. I set up an easel by the window. I started with small things, still lives of fruit in a bowl, the view of the garden from the window. But then, I started to paint from my memory, from my feelings. I painted a canvas of swirling, stormy grays, the color of the study walls. I painted a splash of bright, hopeful yellow, the color of the nursery it had replaced. I painted a single, tiny, perfect yellow duck in the corner. It was a way of processing, of turning the ugliest chapter of my life into something beautiful, something that was mine to control. One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mark. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened. My lawyer had advised me to have no contact. But curiosity got the better of me. I sat in my sanctuary, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, and I opened it. The letter was short. It was full of apologies.
He was sorry for the pain he caused.
He was sorry for his weakness, for letting his mother influence him. He wrote that he had been desperate, terrified of failure, and that he had made a terrible mistake. He said he thought about me every day. He asked if there was any chance we could talk. I read the letter twice. The words were all there, the words I might have once longed to hear. But they felt hollow, empty. They were the words of a man who was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. His regret was born of his own misery, not of any true empathy for mine. He was not sorry for my pain. He was sorry for his consequences. I took the letter and a piece of my own stationery. I wrote a single sentence on it. I have nothing to say to you. I put it in an envelope and mailed it back to his parents' address. It was the last time I ever communicated with him. It was closure. My work in the sanctuary room evolved. I started a large canvas, the biggest I had ever worked on. It became a project that consumed me for weeks. I painted a dark, tangled forest. In the center, there was a woman, small but not weak, holding a single lantern. The light from the lantern pushed back the shadows, revealing a narrow, winding path ahead. It was my story, the story of finding my way out of the darkness. When it was finished, I hung it on the main wall of the living room. It was the first thing people saw when they came into my house. It was a statement. This is who I am. This is what I have survived. Chloe convinced me to submit some of my paintings to a local art show. I was hesitant at first. They felt too personal, too raw. But she insisted. People need to see this, she said. Your story is in those brushstrokes. It's a story of strength. To my astonishment, 2 of my paintings were accepted. The night of the gallery opening was surreal. I stood in a crowded room, surrounded by strangers who were looking at my art, at my soul, hanging on the walls. A woman came up to me, her eyes shining. She pointed to the painting of the woman in the forest. That one, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It feels like you painted my life. We talked for a long time. She told me her own story of betrayal and survival. And in that moment, I realized that my pain was not just mine. It was part of a larger human story. And by sharing it, by turning it into art, I had connected with someone else. I had made them feel less alone. That night, I sold both paintings. It was not about the money. It was about the validation. It was about turning my deepest wound into my greatest strength. Life found a new rhythm, a peaceful, steady rhythm. I had my friends, my art, my quiet, beautiful house that was truly a home. The ghost of the nursery was gone, replaced by the vibrant life I had built in its place. I had not just reclaimed a room. I had reclaimed my entire life. Sometimes I would think about the baby I lost. The grief was a soft, quiet ache now, a part of my history, not a consuming fire. I would sit in my sanctuary, and I would think about the little soul that had been with me for such a short time. And I would thank him. I would thank him for the love I felt for him, a love that was pure and real. And I would thank him for being the catalyst that had saved me from a life that was a lie. His brief, fragile existence had been the light that showed me the truth. It had been a terrible, painful gift, but it was a gift nonetheless. It had led me out of the darkness and onto my own path. And for that, I would be forever grateful. The final, lingering piece of unease was a simple one. They thought they had erased him. But in the end, it was he who had erased them from my life, leaving me with a clean canvas to paint my own future. They had tried to make me small, to manage my grief into a neat, tidy box. But they had failed. My grief, my love, my art, my life. It was all bigger than they could ever have imagined. And it was all mine.